Hi everyone, this is Clay again, and I got another installment, another great interview. Someone who I've been trying to pin down for a while. Some of it's like I'm just trying to pin down myself, but also trying to pin down other people at the same time. So it's problematic. But I have Andrew Westwood, superstar paddler from out east, and he runs Westwood Outdoors with his wife, and they're fairly notable in the canoeing community. And yeah, I was stoked to see him on the river last year out here. He seemed to be doing some annual trips out to the west, so I was really excited to run into them. Still haven't had a chance to really paddle heavily with those guys, but I think we got one day on the can
Yeah,
together.
that's right. We had a great day on the can,
Yeah,
didn't we? Yeah.
yeah, we had some fun, especially on the good old green tongue. So yeah, I got a few questions for you. I mostly just want to pick your brain about your knowledge, and also we want to find out a little bit more about who you are. So uh, explain yourself, Andrew. Who are you? Where do you come from? What's going on?
Well, you mentioned out east, so uh, my wife Carol and I, we both moved to Ottawa before we met, but for the same reason, and that was because the city of Ottawa is really close to some great paddling, and in the winter, it's close to great skiing. So if you're into paddling and skiing like we are, you've got your bases covered. And from then, it was a matter of finding gainful employment. And during that process, Carol and I met, and we've been hanging out, well, close to 30 years, um, and still loving Ottawa. Was just skiing today and paddling a couple of weekends ago. So, beyond that, both of us had developed sort of, uh, I'll say it's kind of like a hobby career in the field of paddling. She started off as a kayak instructor and I as a canoe instructor. And she sort of joined me on the canoeing side of things. And for a number of years now, during the whole time that we've been married, we've been teaching courses together. And doing those courses has allowed us to go on some pretty spectacular road trips, at least by our judgment anyway. We've been as far as the Northwest Territories and frequently out west. We've gone east, and there's been a number of forays down into the States, both for pleasure and sometimes for teaching as well. And at the end of the day, it is exposed us to some awesome rivers and so many wonderful people that I gotta say we're very thankful for the lifestyle that we've been able to enjoy over the years.
Yeah, it seems idyllic, right? For folks that like to be outside and do adventurous things, that you guys have been able to actually work together as well. Like the last thing I would think would be a goal of a lot of people is to work with their wives or their husbands, and you guys are making it work. So,
Kind of like
uh,
tandem boating, I suppose.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, like how lucky is that?
yeah,
She's my best buddy, and she's she's a fabulous paddler and a great instructor. So we have all these different ways of accessing each other's personalities and opinions and expertise, and so we're always sharing things. It really feels like it's a team effort when we go out on an adventure, whether that's directly paddling related or really just it could be I was kind of bummed this afternoon she wasn't able to swing the skiing, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go on my own. And so Carol is a frequent partner in all the things that we get involved in.
nice. And what did you do like for a real job?
You know what? I've had a couple of careers, but the one that I really enjoyed perhaps the most, although I liked all of them, but was being an elementary school teacher. And I started teaching school around 2000, and recently retired from that. And it was really a fulfilling time. I don't want to be too glib and say, hey, it was great and fun. It was, but I think that the personal challenge that it gave me, and also the level of commitment that so many teachers give to that career, but it really underscores the value of purpose. And the purpose could be defined in so many ways, particularly when you're teaching. And that was both a career that I think tapped into some natural skill sets, but also allowed me to evolve skill sets that in some cases I didn't even know existed, and I had to really start from scratch. And it was a very motivating career, so that learning new things was something that was an ever-present component of teaching in elementary school.
Yeah, I suppose just through your interactions, but also what you had to teach as well. So digging into the content. So naturally, that would have benefited your ability to teach as a paddling instructor. Would you call yourself more of an instructor or a guide in the paddling world?
Interesting question, and I think of some of the peers that I've really learned a lot from and enjoyed their company over the years. And those peers that I think of fit into certain sort of dominant categories of paddling. Like there's the creeking group, there's the slalom group, and I would definitely say I'm in the instructional group. You mentioned guiding. I've done some guiding, but I really don't identify with that, and nor do I claim to have a lot of experience with it. But with instruction, as you probably do know, like it's more than just being in front of an audience, but it's also innovating new ideas, and that maybe isn't for the purpose of innovating in of itself, but it's usually a product of being asked a really terrific question and coming up with an accurate answer that may or may not be typical, or maybe it's not written down and I haven't learned it. It was a matter of kind of decoding clues to give a good answer. And that's led to a lot of newness to the sport, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I just did an interview with Michael Howard, and I was kind of grilling him on his where he stood as a coach. Like he did a lot of coaching in the whitewater world, and I was like, what kind of coach were you if you were able to explain it? And he kind of like went into a discussion about going with atypical type of formats. So trying new things, always trying new things. So taking that question or that challenge where you're trying to get across something to somebody and it's just not working, and so you have to really kind of rack your brain or just use some creativity and come at it at a different angle, maybe even like reverse it, deconstruct it or something. So I mean, it's that's just such a benefit of being an instructor is the creativity that comes with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think part of that separation from being an instructor versus guide versus just being someone out there getting radical. It's like, right now you're interacting with people, but not only that, you're also interacting with their thinking process and their psyche and their anxieties and all these different things that you're trying to kind of manage through that process of one little skill that you're trying to kind of nail down. Yeah. So in that, like, what kind of instructor are you? What do you think? Again, it's a hard one. Like, time to blow your horn a little bit, toot your own horn. But
Yeah,
what?
that is something that I never feel particularly comfortable with. But I try, when faced with, and I don't get questions like that very often. But when I am, I think pragmatically and factually about my participation in the instructional community and in my relationship with a student audience. And what kind of instructor am I? I think that I might begin by saying an empathetic instructor. And I'll tell you why that. It's not necessarily being empathetic to emotions. That definitely is part of it. But I'm very observant of both how people are, say, responding to instructional information. And I'm also very keen at cataloging the type of feedback they're giving, whether it's in questions or whether something's looking easy. So if I were to say that no two courses are ever alike, it is true. I might have an agenda that sort of grounds me over the course of like a weekend course or a week-long course, but I really never know how the course will really turn out because I'm trying to respond to the feedback from the participants in the course. And if they need further skill development in one direction that I hadn't written into an agenda, I'm going to go down that path because they need it. So I'm really teaching to the individual, and it's wonderful that if I were to mention Carol again, we often teach together, so we are not only on the same page in how we teach, but there's two sets of eyes and ears gathering information from students. So in a way, we are trying to personalize our delivery of information, even when we're in a significantly large group of people. So the empathy part is a way of developing specific messages to the individual students so that we can advance their skill sets as far as we can go during a course. And I think that there's another element too that's worth highlighting, is that we try to present information in a course in a way that is easily understood. And this is key, I think, to the future, hopefully, investment in that student as a community member, because we'd like every student to buy into paddling and commit to paddling and have a future in paddling. It is true that some people just try it one weekend and next weekend they're going to do another activity. There's so many great sports out there, why not try them all? You kind of like to feel that you are having a meaningful impact such that someone may develop paddling into a passion and commit to it. So when you're teaching something and teaching understanding versus a list of bullet points can be easily forgotten after a weekend, but understanding has a chance of persisting into the future, and if that knowledge persists, in and itself is empowering to a person such that they feel like, oh, I can do this. I might just go buy a used boat. And maybe you can provide some clues as to how you access the community so that they're not alone. That's an important part too. And so if I were to stitch all that together and be empathetic and in a way set people up for future success, if I can do that, then I think I've done a good job. And I often am, as maybe not just an instructor, but just myself in general, I am pretty reflective, and I'm aware when I feel like I haven't done a great job, and so I'll try to do it differently next time. And that's another reason why perhaps no two courses ever sort of turn out to be the same.
So would I be correct in gleaning from that you don't use a lesson plan?
As shocking as it may sound, being involved with Paddle Canada and actually writing manuals in lesson plan format, so they provide a dual purpose of communicating the information that defines a program, but in a written style that can be utilized as a lesson plan. It's true that I wouldn't say that I strictly follow a lesson plan. But you know what, too, having said that just about Paddle Canada and just that involvement, an organization that's really helped me to further grow my skill sets, again, because of the questions asked. But you know what? An instructor starting out may or may not need a resource to help them with lesson planning. An experienced instructor, I think it's important that they also have their autonomy to tap into their vast set of experiences. If they've taught lots of courses and they've seen lots of students, you internalize so many skills, whether they be the soft skills for delivering information effectively or the hard skills, how to paddle really well, for example, that a lesson plan at a certain stage of your evolution as an instructor, a lesson plan has to be used wisely so that there's room to be responsive and teach to the individual when they give you clues of successes and clues of weaknesses that you need to address. If you strictly hold to a lesson plan, you may miss opportunities to address a need. A lesson plan is valuable for structuring the big picture, but at some point you deviate from that so that you can be an effective communicator to address the needs of the person who's right in front of you. And lesson plans don't necessarily do that. They give you the big picture plan for the weekend or however long the course is, but you've also got to, I feel, to take instruction to a little bit of a higher level. You've got to know when to ad-lib it for the benefit of your audience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I typically will run things on a bit of a formula, or basically, like I have a recipe for brownies, and I always go to that same recipe.
Yeah.
But honestly, the brownies don't always come out the same. So it's like, yeah, you just meet people where they're at. You are empathetic, as you say, to the I guess the situation at hand, and try and fill in the gaps or focus on the things that are confounding folks or whatever.
I will say that there are core milestones that you want to approach at the very beginning stage of a lesson or a course, let's say. And then there's a logical sequence of how to build into skill sets. And if that could be termed a lesson plan, I'm certainly on that path because it makes sense. There's a logic to it, and I'm a strong believer in progressive teaching. Progressive meaning start with the easy element that is the foundation for the next level of complexity of that element, and building that way. But I'm not following a script, for example. That's where that ad-libbing comment comes from. You're sometimes you quickly pick up on a type of personality within the group, or the group has a personality, and you alter your maybe your speech patterns, whether it's really lighthearted, or is it a group of type A personalities where they want the serious look. So there's maybe that's another example of empathy, but I'm sort of a reflection of the audience as much as I am a leader of a group.
Oh, sorry, I was flying around. Yeah, it's just such a great interaction, having a group of people, trying to get them through a set of skills on doing something you love, for sure. Would you say that you've had a strong impact on paddling as the person delivering? Like, you mentioned something about Paddle Canada and writing manuals and that kind of thing. Would you say you've had a strong impact on paddling in North America, Canada, Eastern Canada? Like, do you think that through the Paddle Canada system and your design has, because you had a large part in developing the manual for teaching moving water. Yeah, would you say it's?
Oh,
big,
I
small?
think it would be termed impactful. Um, and I think that all things being relative, part of that impact is also a product of time. I've been involved with Paddle Canada over a fairly long period of time. I think it's approaching 15 years. And I also feel that uh, being a member of some other uh, groups and institutions, whether they be um, a instructional company that I've had a lot of experience teaching just because I've been associated with some local companies, and that provided uh, multiple audiences in a fairly compact amount of time to hone skills. And from that, certain patterns fall out. And then if they're shared with Paddle Canada or if they're shared on the Westwood Outdoors website, uh, if I'm approached by a publisher to write a book or write magazine articles, I guess they're all impactful if whoever's on the receiving end, who's the audience to these ideas, are intrigued by them and if they want to accept them. But I'm a very strong proponent of the belief there's more than one way to do something. And if the room in an article or in a manual only has room for one way, um, I may have been influential in writing it that way, but it's not the only way. Um, I am preferentially selecting what I think is the strongest addition. Um, but like I say, it's up to the audience receiving it whether they're buying into it. And if not, that's probably because there's more than one way to do it. And that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, um, the introduction to myth was definitely something that was controversial, and I think kind of ruffled some feathers for some people who had
Yeah.
some sort of skin in the game with it, with how you teach an eddy turn. And that's one thing that we talked about, myself and Michael, in the last episode that I just recorded. It was like, that this is the quintessential skill. Like we want to teach people how to do an eddy turn. This is just, it's where your all your moving water lessons lead up to, and then once you're past that, then you can get into other things. But um, the introduction to myth into that was a little bit hard for some people to take, and then other people really just kind of ran with it. There's other, I work with some instructors that's just how they do it. That's what they use. They've really kind of tagged into myth, right? Myth it's a great tool, and for anyone who's listening doesn't really know what that is. It's we used to teach power, angle, tilt. You approach the an eddy line from inside an eddy or outside an eddy with some speed. You build up some power. You set an angle or a direction that's supposed to be effective and not blow you out or get you trapped. And then basically you have to put your boat on edge because you're going to be carving against another current going the opposite way. We all know this thing. Moving forward, the use of myth, I think, is timely and situational for each student and or each group, and it's a great tool. Obviously, it has had a great effect on how people are teaching, because like I said, some people really kind of dug their teeth into it, and then some people are just digging their heels in it, like, yeah, this is like what are you thinking? You can't do that. I think if we can all just try and find the benefit of each technique, and then use it as the proper tool for the right situation, then we'll all come out of this a little bit better. So in myth, I mean, where one thing that's missing, and I think that may be hard for folks to kind of connect to, especially on the getting out of flat water and then moving into the river situation, is there's no discussion of like angle in terms of like how you approach the eddy line. Now, how do you rectify that or reconcile that in the naysayers, or for lack of a better word, not naysayers, but for your groups when you're teaching it, like when you're describing how they orient their boat and use myth in terms of moving water, because I understand it to be, it was developed as a tool for flat water, great tool for flat water, amazing to have that. Okay, we need to select the bow wave side, right? That's what it's for before we start our turn on flat water. The river does it for us, and in the use of the river, we're kind of initiating a turn maybe when we don't have to, but we're also developing a little bit of a carve before we enter the current. So where do you put in angle? Yeah, angles.
Okay, well,
People are
I do have a, kind of an approach to answering that type of question. And by the way, kind of an interesting historical context for myth. Myth actually was not developed for flat water.
okay.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of interesting. The flatwater program adopted it, but it had existed in moving water for, I'm going to say, about 8 years prior. I can say that because, yes, I did develop myth, but the historical part, I've got to share some credit with Scott McGregor, and you may recognize that name. Scott McGregor is the owner of Rapid Magazine, and actually many more now, but way back in early 2000, in the early years of Rapid Magazine, Scott would often approach me to write an article for canoeing. And he'd come up with a theme, he'd come up with an idea. And he goes, in this particular case, myth didn't exist. And Scott said, Andrew, I want you to write an article on how do you do eddy turns, but I don't want it to be Pat. I don't want another
Okay.
Pat article,
Yeah.
or another rendition of Pat.
Okay.
And that was really interesting. And it happened to come at a time when my interests had aligned curiously in creeking and slalom boating. And why that is so interesting is that if you look at video of either environment, you'll see that the boats are really different, the environments look really different, but the paddling styles are actually remarkably similar. Now I say paddling style, and here's the key, and that is there is a paddling style that is commonly used in reasonably technical situations, and that style is carving arcs. So a lot of the movements require arcs. Okay, so if that's one style, if arcing is a way of moving across a river, and why might that be appealing? And it's like, well, boats generally travel easily along curving paths. Like, it's kind of a natural thing for canoes to do. If you stop paddling a canoe, it'll naturally start gliding into an arc. A canoe would never travel straight without help. A canoe needs a rudder on it to go straight. So straight is sort of an unnatural thing, and it's kind of like nature. Rivers don't flow straight. A river is only stable when it starts weaving back and forth and going around bends. But a straight river is usually one that's been helped to go straight with concrete. Anyway, don't mean to be too far off topic here, but the idea of a boat curving and gliding nicely and being efficient when it's on an arc is a style of paddling. Pat is a different style. It's totally effective. It's just a different style. It's apples and oranges. Both are, fruit. Pat is predicated on the idea of I'm going to go straight And it's really easy to do that in a tandem boat, by the way, because your stern paddler obviously can make it go straight. And the bow paddler can continue providing momentum even if the stern paddler is creating some friction strokes to make the boat go straight. But you have to make it go straight. And then if you go straight towards an eddy line, at some point, if your boat is leaving an eddy, presumably it's pointing somewhat upstream and somewhat out in the river, but it's not pointing where you want to go, because you're going to want to turn downstream. So because you're paddling straight, when you hit the eddy line, you're going to want to hit it at an angle that is compatible with your turn to go downstream. And then we could use an acronym like PAT, where you define certain contributing elements, like the power that you need to enter the current, the angle that would allow you to cross the eddy line in preparation for turning downstream, and tilt so you don't fall over. The other style of paddling, which would be paddling arcs, isn't very well served by PAT, because PAT isn't defining the arc. And I like to use the analogy that PAT is, other than being a different paddling style, but PAT is a moment in time. It's defining the moment you cross the eddy line. And the rest of the maneuver is not really described by PAT. You know, how much power do you need to cross the eddy line? What's the angle you need to cross the eddy line? And you need to tilt when you're doing that. Carving needs to be defined. It needs to define the movement from start to finish. So instead of being a kind of like a photograph of a moment in time, like PAT is, MITH is meant to describe or set up the video version. It's the arcing path from the moment you've initiated your arc, and then you're choosing an arc, whether tight or wide. It kind of depends on where you're going, but that arc, that radius of that arc, is determined at the initiation point. And then MITH also defines like how much momentum, the initiation of the arc, whether it's tight or wide, and then holding a tilt throughout the maneuver, not just for the stability of entering a current, but the tilt is creating the carving edge using the chines, the features of your canoe, to gain traction to hold the arcing path from start to finish. So PAT does work in that style of paddling, and then MITH supports an alternate style of paddling, one that is focused on arcing paths.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's two different applications, and I think you know, it depends on what you want your student to get out of the exercise. I mean, I would consider the for lack of a better word, I mean, for lack of a better approach, I would consider, out of all of the elements when it comes to that moment when you enter the current, or vice versa, leave the current into the eddy line, into the eddy itself, that your direction of travel, so your quote unquote angle, would be the most important thing. And so being able to control your boat to maintain that, and understand what each angle or direction represents, and get the feeling of it, is also very important. So it's for me, I've kind of like I've brought MITH into my repertoire after I've done some kind of basic PAT turns, and people are starting to get the hang of it, and we're going to start muddying the water a little bit with different ways or different approaches to crossing eddy lines. it's again, it's like you say, there's no one way to skin a cat. So why would you, you know, try and pigeonhole yourself or stick to that one lesson plan, as discussed. Um, and it leads into so many other discussions, like, do we really need to paddle in an arc all the time? Can we go straight? Can we try to maintain a straight trajectory across the current? And you know, does do we want our students to be tilting while they're turning while not maintaining speed? That's a big challenge for newbies coming into eddy lines and stuff through current. So it's I think the discussion is never ending, and always, you know, one person's going to have one concept that's basically how they do it. And I think the most important thing in terms of like how we teach as instructors is that, for one thing, we all have to have a little bit of a consistent message, right? That we need, for one, momentum or power, and then we also need to kind of either initiate or have a certain trajectory, right? And then we also have to have our boat on edge. And after that, we can add on, you know, a hold or a strokes or a whatever you want, you know, depending on what students are missing from whatever their maneuver is looking like. Such a great discussion piece. I think so many people have sat around a fire or whatever, and, you know, over a couple beers, and had their own opinion. It was so good to talk to you about this. I actually have to cut it a bit short, and I hope that we can, you know, come back and do this again, because I have to actually go get my son from
Oh, really?
practice. So
That's a big
tried to
priority.
pile in, yeah, tried to pile in too many things. And I love the fact that we actually got into the nitty gritty of myth, and got to hear from you about it, and also get that story about Scott and his request for an article on how to actually do eddy turns. You know, the one thing that's really, it confounded me when I did my not my OFA, my Orca level 3, and I think you introduced it, or I can't remember who it was, but we were on the flat water section first day. They introduced it like, this is how you have to do your eddy turns. This is what we're expecting to see. And in a solo boat, it was killing me, man. Like, every time I went from my onside to my offside, so turning, I was not an ambi turner using myth. I could only turn left. I couldn't turn right. So every time I came out on a right hand turn, I would fall over, because I would try and initiate and then go over to the cross side, offside, and then the timing would be off, and then I'd get caught and flip over. And in fact, on the final, I ended up flipping on the eddy line like three times, and I was like, I'm failed. Like, they're not going to give me my cert, and, you know, whatever. But you know, I did well enough on the rest of the course that they, you know, recognized that I was just having a little bit of a technical malfunction on that day. I mean, but
Let me just break in for a moment, and this is perhaps part of one of the contributing issues to the acceptance of myth early on, and maybe in continuing today. But I think sometimes change is hard to accommodate, especially if whatever you're doing is working fine. Like, why change? But myth is specifically for tandem. And I think in the earlier years, and I'm not sure how many years ago you took your instructor's course, but a number of people thought that it was for both tandem and solo. And something quite different, though related, because it's a carving tool. But in solo, we use 2x4, or the acronym CAPT, for cadence, paddle angle, paddle position, and tilt. And it's that carving tool that is uniquely developed for solo canoes. And myth, though one could argue the elements of myth can be present in a solo boat, and sure, it's still a canoe.
I was
It
just gonna
works so
like
much better with a tandem boat because of the
right.
partners, the
Yeah.
balanced term partners. Solo, there could be issues like a specific initiation point. As you found when going to the offside, it didn't quite. It needed something else. Well, that's what two by
Right.
four is.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it really wasn't necessary there, but what I was gonna say is that I've used it for both tandem and solo moving forward and use it even and more lately. Like
Mhm.
I keep applying different ways of doing things, and the one thing that it's freed me from doing is having to steer at the last moment and setting up my arc early so that I can leave on power, in a
Yeah.
solo boat. So it takes away the need to actually steer or correct your trajectory if you get it right. It takes a long time to get there. So yeah, I mean, like I said, we could get into all these other capped and then two by four and then the I always call it a shark. What do you
Oh, the
call
shark.
it?
Shark's a lot of fun. That requires really good conditions for that. But like so many skills are adapted to a certain scenario, and
Yeah,
shark has its scenario. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So many things to talk about in terms of like those acronyms and those concepts. So thanks for making the time for this, relatively short interview. Um, if you're keen, I'll reach out again. We'll try and do it again and maybe dig in a little bit deeper to some other concepts. Um, I know that many other people are gonna enjoy hearing you talk about how it was developed and what it was for. And I think just like everything else, it can be applied in many different situations, and it works as needed. So, yeah, thanks again, man.
Well,
I'll
hey,
be in touch.
it's been a pleasure. Nothing I'd rather do on the afternoon than talk canoeing. So this has been a lot
Okay.
of fun. And if we get a chance to do it again, that would be awesome.
Okay, I'll be in touch. Yeah, love nerding out on this stuff. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, have a good one, man. Merry Christmas.
You too. Take care.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.